please welcome Henry to our podcast. Henry, thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome, Ivy. Yes, I've been waiting for this for a little while now. And like Ivy said, my name's Henry Klauke. And what I do here is I assist technology challenged entrepreneurs to attract and nurture their next 100 ideal prospects. That's what gets me jumping out of bed in the morning, and that's through done-for-you email campaigns and email marketing. So I love sales, love marketing and copywriting, which is what I've been trained in. So I met Ivy through our mutual sales coach, Eric Lofholm. Just a really vibrant community. And definitely Ivy's one of the movers and shakers. I like to think I'm right up there as well. So just to put this lightning in a bottle on this podcast is so excellent. And just here to share what I've got to share. Just a lot going on business-wise. It's really exciting coming into the new year with my debut book coming out. It's called Inbox Income. It's been a really fun project. And yes, the book about emails does have an email list as I'm writing it. So it's all good fun, helping people who are pushed online nowadays. And I'm sure we'll get into all that during this interview.
Henry, my name is Dan. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'll be getting to know you along with our audience as we ask you questions and you answer them. The main purpose of this podcast is to give people access to people they may never come across in regular life, right? It obviously gets your name out there to people who just know us. And for people who just know you, they get to know us a little bit. So we have one main purpose, which is to help people live their best life, right? And we realize that oftentimes you may have heard something before, and you may say it for the first time, or you may say it for the 5th time they've heard it, but they may connect with you different. It may come out of your mouth and be the first time they think, I want to do something with that. And that may lead them to a new action, which lead them to a new whole direction in life. So you can be a person who helps them with that today. I have a lot of questions about your business, but we're going to jump in with these questions and then, excuse me, I have something in my mouth. We're going to jump in and start with these questions, and then we will transition into some business stuff kind of interjected in between. So first main question is, if I was a genie and I could grant you just one wish, what would be that wish? Couple rules: you can't wish to become the genie, and you can't wish for more wishes. So what would be the wish I could grant you?
Sure, those are the classic caveats. Thanks, Dan, for that one. Man, it's a tricky one. I like to think, because we all have this genie up here where we can tell our subconscious mind what we want, and as long as we're not blocking ourselves in any way, we can get it. But if I were to go beyond that, I would say I wish that I didn't have to sleep and I could just wind myself up like a little wind-up toy. I think that's probably a pretty common answer for us entrepreneurs, where I'm working late into the night and my brain is like firing off. I got ideas coming to me, but this body down here is kind of like, all right, Henry, we gotta recharge these batteries here for a minute. So either that, maybe more hours in a day.
What I'm hearing is more time.
More time.
How do you manage your time?
That's a great question. Well, it starts off, this is something I've been slacking off recently as I've been traveling home for the holidays, where I'm at right now in the Chicago area. Planning the day in writing the night before. That's something that Eric teaches, our sales coach. It's such a anchoring position where, like, if I've got my Google Calendar, right, where schedule stuff with clients, or if I have networking or this event, for example, it's all well and good. When I get it down on paper, for some reason, it always looks like I have more time. There's something about the Google Calendar where it's like, holy smokes, I'm swamped. But then when I write it out, I'm like, oh wait, I've got a half hour here, an hour there, and I can fit in whatever I'm working on, whether it's the book, whether it's squeezing in some exercise, or any number of things, really. Calling someone back that I need to follow up with. That's been a really big help for me. I've historically not been a great time manager, but at the end of the day, it's like one of my mentors says, it's no one can manage time. It just keeps ticking, ticking, ticking. But really, what it's self-management. You can manage yourself. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of time, you seem young for this, but you're probably aware of the movie Back to the Future. It's one of my favorite movies.
Oh,
So
yes.
if you had a time machine and you could travel back to an even younger version of yourself and give yourself advice, whether that's like what you do in school or life or make a certain decision, what advice would you give your younger self based on what you now know in life?
I go back and forth. Our past really shape us, and there's a lot of lessons that I wouldn't have learned any other way than going through it the hard way. So it's like, if I go into the past to give advice, well, that advice I learned from those mistakes or fumbles that I made in the past. But I would say it's not necessarily advice, but just tell myself, hey, Henry, you're doing a great job, man. That's something I've been telling myself more and more lately. I've been hard on myself in the past, really. Type A, where I went to, Ivy League school. I really pushed for that. Did the whole 9 to 5 thing at one point until I started my own business. So that's part of it. And then, maybe I might add, hey, you don't have to go to college. I might add that. I go back and forth on that, but I don't know if younger me would even be ready for that message.
So I acknowledge that it would be difficult to have a younger version of yourself listen. And I totally agree that if you never go through it, you don't really learn. The best teacher is experience, right? It's not just advice from someone else. So let me adjust this slightly. One, I want you to brag a little bit because you said you went to an Ivy League school. I want to hear about that. And two, it's interesting because you said you might give the advice not to go to college, which I tend to agree with a little bit, depending on what you're going to pursue in life. So share a little bit about what you pursued in college, what you did early on that led you to what you do now. And then the adjusted question, this is like a complex question here, is if you were to go speak to, let's say, a high school class right now, right? And you're just like giving them advice, what advice would you give them?
I like that a lot better. Yeah. So I call it like a past life at this point, because I made such an early career change that it's almost like I flipped a switch and there's a new Henry came out of the ashes. But so yes, I went to Ivy League school. I went to Cornell, where I was on the rowing team. And I know that's what Ivy and I have in common with where I was a college athlete. So that's one part where I'm like, well, that was a pretty cool experience, and I'm glad I got to experience that. And it's like another thing that our mentor Eric Lawfom talks about is every window of opportunity is one day going to close. So being a college athlete, you got to go to college, right? I couldn't be a college athlete now unless I got held back, 6, 7 grades. So I did that, and I studied biological engineering. Yes, the blow-off class. No, of course not. That's the type A, looking for the hard thing. I always loved math and science. And what's funny is what I crack up about nowadays, one of my main drivers for that was that I wouldn't have to write as many academic papers. And now writing is all I do. But there's a huge difference between the stuffy 5-paragraph essays that we're taught in school and email marketing, for example, or just any marketing where it's more conversational, it's more fun, creative. So that was my past life. And then I really just fell into personal development and started learning about sales and marketing. With copywriting and marketing, it does have that scientific element where it's market research, knowing exactly who you're talking to, getting into the psychology of it. I was always interested in psychology. That's really what sales is and marketing. But then it's got that creative spin. You've got that X factor that you add in where like a computer could never do marketing. AI, I don't think it'll take a long time before they're good at marketing. It's all emotional. So I like that duality where, it's this is the hard science and the soft science, left brain, right brain. And that's really what brought me to consulting out of college. That was my first career because it had that analytical side as well. But with bioengineering, I love the material, but I was like, I would never do well in a lab. I'm too much of a people person for that. So I like the business side from the consulting of that. And so I'm getting around to what I would say. Let's say I'm speaking at a high school graduation. I would really, really suggest those kids to take what they hear with a grain of salt, for sure. My parents were very traditional. My dad's been a corporate lawyer for his whole career, 25 plus years. He's only been at like 2 companies. So that's where his mindset was at. And when he was growing up and going to college, the internet didn't exist. And now there's just so many opportunities online that it's not that our parents or our adult figures are holding us back intentionally, but they just don't know any better. They're explaining what they know. And with the fast-paced world that we're living in, it's it's just like listening to yourself and taking into account all the advice you get without just soaking it in blindly. That'd be my advice.
That is actually very, very good advice. And just to see that how you were brought up with your background, and it really shows in your thirst for wisdom and knowledge, for learning, for applying yourself and personal development. What is a habit or belief that has carried you to who you are today and to you being successful?
It really sounds silly, but positivity and just a good attitude from a lot of my clients that I've worked with, and even back in the corporate world, people they really appreciate my positive nature and my smile. That's like one of my biggest compliments is my smile. So it's so simple that a lot of people miss it. When I was an analyst in the consulting world, I was like way over my head in doing this network security stuff. So dealing very tech heavy. I was project managing, so I didn't have to do any coding or get deep into the trenches, but I got some amazing compliments of people who are like, "You're the best project manager we've had in a long time." And I was just like, what? I'm just making this up as I go. But I realized it's just because I'd show up and be present, crack a smile, remember what I told these people earlier, remember little details about people. So I was always destined for the business world, you could say. But yeah, just the habit of positivity. And it is a habit. It definitely is a habit. It's not just, I'm a serious guy or whatever. No, you can learn it. Almost everything's a learned skill.
I am in absolute agreement about positivity and how big of a difference that makes.
Yes.
So when you think back to the people you got into your career with, who would be like your mentors, whether that be through like programs, maybe you went to courses, maybe you did whatever, who'd be the mentors that led you that direction and that you now turn to for, like your guidance to continue forward in your career?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, my first mentor, you could say, is my manager at corporate. So the way this company, I was with a company called Accenture, this giant global tech firm. And the usual deal is you get a project, you're on there for 3 months, 6 months, traveling every single week, wherever you're going. It's usually like middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania or New York, like upstate New York or something. I believe this was in Boston at the time. But I got lucky and I was on a 2.5-year project and that was by choice. I could have left. I played with that idea because that's what some of the folks in the business were mentioning. They're like, yeah, you got to collect experience and stuff and leave this project. But I was like, this project is really good though. I really like it. And it was incredibly dull and unfulfilling. That was the real negative about it. But everything else was superb, including this manager that I'm talking about. I had a great team, really great relationship with him, and he was just. I saw myself as this young guy who didn't know much, kind of insecure at that point, but he really saw me as an equal, and I really appreciate that. We're good friends to this day. His name's Bob Alexander, and we would just talk business, talk life a lot. One of his famous phrases was between you, me, and the lamppost, and he would he would talk about either his boss or like the company in general, and just tell it like it is. And what's funny is he actually left the company a couple months after I did, so I caught up with him recently. But just what I learned from him with personal relationships, he was the lead for this client. It was a pharmaceutical client, so he taught me a lot of sales skills without teaching me sales skills, if that makes sense. Just watching how he interacted with people, how he followed up, just his demeanor. He brought that positivity for sure. Just a great guy. He really took me under his wing. He's a wrestling coach, so we bonded over the sports part, and I mean that's why we were such great teammates. That was my first mentor, you could say. And then once I started really getting into the personal development space, I took a sales course called High Ticket Closing from Dan Locke. And I learned a lot from him. He's got a really interesting style, but being like the first course I took, I like took it all in. And some of the stuff he teaches don't quite resonate with me anymore. So I'm like unlearning some of that. But he taught me a lot of really great, he's got some really punchy one-liners that I pull out every once in a while. But through that course, I met one of my current coaches. I have a few, but that's Joe DiBianca, who just totally turned my life around. And man, I could talk a ton about Joe. I feel like this question's getting I'm complete with this question at least. But he's my coach to this day. I've hired him for past year plus. I had a call with him, I think yesterday, yes. So he just continues to help me. He's an emotional addictions coach. And so he's just helped me get through a lot of just deep stuff, like my procrastination habits, my, on the personal side with relationships, with my family, boundaries. Man, he completely turned me around on boundaries. So I have so much love for him. And whenever I'm on a podcast or a summit speak, I tend to shout out to my guy, Joe.
Ivy and I are both coaches, and I can appreciate your shout out to Joe because one of the things he follows is to be very niche, right? Like a very specialty thing. So if you were to look at what you do, you've called it copywriting, you've called it helping those who don't have those skill sets, right? And helping them with emails and stuff like that. What is your niche? Like, what's your specialty in what you do?
Well, the way I see it is because I really value coaching, and from what I've found, and you might agree with this or you might not, but coaches in the one-on-one setting are just dynamite. That's just the perfect situation for all these coaches that I interact with. But for whatever reason, it seems like there's a mistranslation when it comes to writing copy for their website or Facebook post, LinkedIn post, whatever it is. They use big words. Like I've got a Word document with just like strange things that I find on coaches' websites. I'm like, what does this mean? It's kind of like a jumbled up jargon salad where it's like, it's not actually what people are looking for. Like, yes, that might be what you're delivering for them, but it's finding that benefit behind the benefit, right? It's searching for those hidden emotional triggers for people. So yeah, my niche would be those coaches who already have a successful business, but they've been wanting to do some sort of online marketing, or whether it's email marketing or not, and they're intimidated. They're not quite sure what it looks like. So I really like to break it down for them, handle whatever I can handle, and then hand it off to them. So it's really there's two sides to it, in my opinion, where it's the persuasive writing. How do you persuade people to take action in the written word? And then the other side is, well, how do you set up the tech so it all runs smoothly? And a lot of other copywriters, they don't even want to touch the tech stuff. They just say, here's my writing, go ahead. But that's what I like.
Very cool that you shared so many golden nuggets and shared a lot of insights of people that have been a big influence in your life and business and how you show up. What is one of the biggest lessons you learned this year? Because you've had some major adventures and life changes this year that I have to say, I'm very proud of you for taking action, and I'm very proud of you for showing up.
Thank you, Ivy. So the question is, what's my biggest takeaway this year? Well, something I'm learning more and more is I'm very intuitive. And for a long time, I didn't listen to that inner gut, that inner voice. But since I've been following it more and more, it always works out. It always works out. So for example, I I had this urge to move across the country this year to Wyoming from Boston. It's a story I love to tell because I feel like people are always like, why Wyoming? Including the people in Wyoming. They're like, why would you come here? You know? And so, yeah, so it started in 2018. Okay, so I'm new into my corporate career and just getting into personal development. I actually read my first book, which is a finance related book called Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. It's a really excellent book from the 90s. Just makes you think about money differently in terms of time, in terms of where your priorities are at, basically. Anyway, so I was into that world. I was like looking at finance. I was like, I got real money coming in. I have an actual paycheck and I'm paying rent and other expenses. So anyway, and okay, we'll back up a sec as well, because the reason I went to Boston, stop me if you've heard this one before, but I was dating a girl who lived in Boston. So I moved there. I had the corporate job there. We broke up, of course. So it was like, I liked Boston. It's a cool city. There's a lot of history. It's a very young town. But I knew it wasn't permanent. It wasn't my decision, which was pretty much the theme up until that point, where people would tell me this is the right way. And I would say, okay, I guess that's the right way. And it didn't quite line up with me. So anyway, so I was looking to leave Boston from the start, basically. Okay, so we're back into the finance world. I realized, oh, well, taxes, that's a very location-based thing. So I was looking at different low costs of living areas and taxes and stuff. And I found that there's about 7 or 8 states in the US with no income tax on the state level. So I was an employee at the time. That's what I was looking at. It's like New Hampshire, Texas, Florida, Nevada, I believe, a couple more, and then Wyoming. And when I found that list, it was like Wyoming was like highlighted, popping out of the page at me. And I was not ready for that message. I was like, Wyoming? Yeah, it was like the same reaction. What's there for me? But then this year, I kept getting more and more of these nudges in that direction, where I'd hear someone say the word Wyoming in a conversation. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And someone's like, oh, did you see this new Netflix show? It's set in Wyoming. It's called Longmire. I was like, what? So the tipping point for me probably was I was dating this girl back in Boston, and she was a PhD student from China. So she was an international student staying in Boston. And we were talking about summer plans. She wanted us to do a little trip. And she goes, you know where I'd love to go in the whole world? And I'm like, this could be anywhere. This could be Europe. It could be South America, wherever. She goes, Yellowstone National Park. And so I said, that's the answer. That's where I got to go. So ever since, it's just been following my gut, whatever feels right. Logically, sometimes it doesn't make sense. And it's being okay with that, being listening to that right brain.
I love that story. I have a similar one, and I won't share it here, but I love when people just kind of follow their gut, trust their gut, and pursue something just because they're like, that's what I'm going to do. And I think it's a huge step for anybody's life when they realize that a lot of the things they're doing, they didn't choose. They do because simply like it was a good suggestion, or that's what they're brought up and people told them that was the right path. And we can get on your own path. It's an incredible experience. So I'm really proud of you, even though I don't know you, that you've taken that action and done those things. I think that's really incredible. If you could try to condense all of your advice into one piece of advice that would help our audience live their best life, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
Wow, that's a tall order. That's a lot of pressure. It goes along with the intuition thing. It's just being true to yourself. Being true to yourself. Maybe that's cliche, like you said, but this stuff that is cliche often bears repeating, in my opinion. I realize, I don't fit into the East Coast world of Boston, of like the materialism of the, that's really what happened over those 2.5 years, 3 years that I was there, where I thought I was someone. And then little by little, layer by layer, I got into who I really am. And at the end of that rope, the puzzle piece did not fit anymore to where I was at, both in my career and my location. So yeah, just being true to yourself. I mean, there's such a pressure to fit in, I feel like, especially nowadays with social media and stuff.
What is a question that we didn't ask you that you want to talk about?
What's the number one question that people ask me when I'm selling or when I'm prospecting, whatever? And that is, I think I got it asked it today at least once, but it's, Henry, I get hundreds of emails every day and I don't look at them. Like, why should I send emails out? And my answer is it's twofold. One, which is a great reminder, even for myself when I say it and I hear my own advice, it's that you're not your ideal prospect. Just because you think a certain way or you have a certain opinion does not mean other people feel the same way or have the same opinion or have the same point of view. So just because you are flooded with emails doesn't necessarily mean that they are or they feel that way. Now, the second part is, yeah, of course, a lot of people do feel that way. And the idea is, well, I always ask them, well, do you open any emails? I'm like, yeah, I open some from the people I like, It's like, well, there's the key. Yes, there is a lot of noise. That's for sure. But it's how do you stand out? How do you give so much value that people look forward to your emails? I mean, I have people that I follow that every day. I look forward to their emails, check it out, open it up. And it's a very different thing when you're writing the email and you've got the subject line there all by itself. And it's really about the mindset of how is it going to look when it's smushed between 50 other subject lines, So that means, not being pitchy, trying to be unique if you can, like one word email subject lines, if you can get away with it, are so great because you have people with these long ones and you see a short one. Like, oh, interesting. Yeah, like weird words, weird spellings. That always works. Just make it as enticing as you can, and like irresistibly curious of like, wow, what's in this email? I wonder what it is. Because I've seen a lot of really great, I actually have a class that I teach on this where I look through my inbox And I found 5 emails, great emails, but their subject lines are so bland that it doesn't matter how good the email is because it's never going to get opened. So I think the subject line is so underrated and overlooked.
Henry, I think you've given a lot of good pieces of advice to people, but I'm sure the same way it works with any sort of marketing, they're hearing this and saying, yeah, but you're the pro, so can you help me with that? Because I would struggle to do that on my own. So how would people reach out to you if they're curious about learning from you or pursuing you for services?
Oh, great question. Probably the best would be on LinkedIn. I have a pretty unique name, so it's easy to find me. Henry, just the normal Henry spelling, and my last name Klauke is Klauke.
Thank you, Henry, so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on our podcast.
It was great to be here.